The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Project Independence and You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. I'm your host, Rebecca Miller, along with our co-host, Otto Lohse. Good morning, Otto.
Good morning, Rebecca. Nice day.
Good day, good day. Just a week away from spring, so I think we all have a little bit of a bigger smile. Of course, we've got Christina Liu, who is the producer of the radio show, brings these wonderful programs every week with great guests, just like the one we have today. And she is also the Director of Senior Citizen Affairs for the Department of Services for the Aging, Project Independence. And then, of course, Dan Cox, the Executive Director of LIU's WCWP.org, 88.1 FM. And our guest today, without further ado, is Khy Ee Siew, and she is from the Cornell Cooperative extension of Nassau County. And you've been on the show before and have really given us some really great answers. And I used it today, especially all about freezing and food and all that kind of stuff. But today you're here to talk about deciphering food claims, nutritional labels versus food package claims. And there's so many questions that we have. So first of all, welcome and thank you for giving us an hour of your time.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm so happy to be back and discuss this really important topic. It's actually personally one of my favorites, so I'm excited to hear what questions you guys might have.
So sorry about that. I'm sitting in my office and they're repairing a window, so I just asked the guy if he could maybe do that a little bit later. So it's again, thank you for joining us. And we did get a lot of the information that you sent over. And the thing that I'm kind of looking at that is so confusing, because I read labels and, if I'm doing keto or if I'm doing whatever diet I'm doing, and I try to decipher carbs and net carbs and all these sugar claims that you have, you've got sugar-free, zero sugar, no sugar, without sugar, negligible source of sugar, trivial source of sugar, dietarily insignificant source of sugar. And the other thing is that I see a lot, and I have no idea really what it means, is sugar alcohols. Like, what is that? So I think there's so many different ways to explain the sugar, and also words and, things that mean sugar, but don't say sugar. So you don't know, and now we're hearing so many things about stevia, and is it good? Is it not good? So I know it's a lot of questions, but I would love to start off with kind of breaking down the words that related to sugar, what they mean, and what are the things that are sugar but don't say sugar that we need to look out for.
Mm-hmm. So that was a couple of great questions that you mentioned there, Rebecca. I think the first thing I kind of want to tackle is to distinguish the information that you can find at the front of the packaging, which is what we consider nutrition claims, as well as the information you find at the back of a food package, which is typically presented in the form of nutrition fact labels. Now, those two things, nutrition claims and nutrition facts labels, are meant to offer similar information, but I think the one thing that everyone can really rely on is the information you find on nutrition facts labels. So if you look at the back of any food product, or maybe at the bottom of it, wherever the nutrition label is, you're going to notice that towards the bottom of the nutrition facts label, there are two lines that kind of indicate the total amount of sugar in a product. Now, those two lines will offer that information in terms of grams of sugar of the product. So it'll say total sugar, and then tell you the grams right after those words. And then you'll also see a second line under it that says includes however much amount of added sugar. Now, those two lines are going to give you probably the best information in terms of whether or not the product is high or low in added sugar. So that's the first thing I would kind of point people to, like if you want to refer whether or not your foods are high or low in sugar. The second thing I want to talk about is ingredients list. Now, you mentioned that it can be really confusing to kind of navigate whether or not something has sugar or not. So typically for products that do have sugars in them, whether it's granulated sugar or honey or agave syrup or maple syrup, you're going to find those things listed in the ingredients list. And I think those are all sugars that we're all pretty familiar with. But for things like sugar alcohols, it will typically say sugar alcohol in the ingredients list and then in parentheses kind of outline the specific alcohols that they used in the product. Now, for sugar alcohols, you'll typically find that in a lot of sugar-free products, just because sugar alcohols is another type of artificial sweetener that food companies may use to sweeten the taste of their foods without adding actual sugar to it. So typically, again, you'll find the sugar alcohols in those sugar-free products. And that's definitely for people who maybe are trying to stay away from products that have added sugar and happen to like the taste of artificial sweeteners as well.
So with the nutrition label,
Yes.
you sent us over an example. I know there are people listening that can't see. So there, it is uniform on every food, right? There, it has to be the same kind of breakdown. And, I assume that all foods, I guess, except for like open produce and things like that, must have the nutrition label. Or if you buy like a packet of something, the outside of the packet should have it. Doesn't have to have the individual things. So is that true that all foods must have a nutrition label on it?
So that's a great question, Rebecca. So technically, all processed foods are required to have a nutrition label on it. So when I say processed, it could be canned food, it could be frozen food. It can just be any food that has undergone some type of process to get packaged in any way. Now, the only foods that are not required to have that nutrition label on the back is actually fresh produce. So if you ever walk into your supermarket and you notice your fruits and vegetables not having a nutrition label, that's why, because they're not required to. And to kind of go back to your question on whether or not the format is standardized, it is for nutrition labels. And that's why I always encourage people to, if you go food shopping and you really have any questions on what your product may have, the nutrition label is going to be a great resource to lean on.
Is it global? Because I mean, I've seen people bring food or chocolates from another country and they all have the nutrition label. I may not be able to understand what it says because it's in another language, but it seems that most countries also have adopted the nutrition facts label.
You know, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure if other countries share the same format as what is issued by the FDA. That being said, I've like from what I've seen, like from personal travels and things like that, they do tend to have similar formats in that,
Right.
maybe you see calories, maybe you see fats, carbs. So I'm sure that other countries might have some other system in place of their own to kind of dictate what they do want on a label or not. But I'm not exactly sure if the standard is identical to what we see that's regulated by the FDA.
Right.
You mentioned two things, required and FDA. And I
Yes.
really didn't give a lot of thought to the FDA part until we started preparing for this show. And I thought about how many millions of items the FDA has to approve. And it's not just food. They get involved with medical stuff and all kinds of other things. I find it hard to believe that they can do that. I mean, what the process to get these things cleared, I don't know how it would work. I mean, do you have any knowledge of what you have to go through to get approval from the FDA?
That is a great question. So I don't personally know exactly like kind of like the the process of what it's like to maybe get your nutrition label updated or things like that. I do know everything does have to go through some sort of application process. So I think you're in the right mindset, Otto, in the sense that there was probably a lot of paperwork down at the FDA office. With that said, the FDA is responsible for like making sure that our nutrition label information stays current and updated to current nutritional science evidence. And they're also responsible for somewhat overseeing nutrient claims as well, which I think is something that we mentioned a bit earlier in the beginning of our conversation. Now, I say that the FDA is somewhat responsible for nutrient claims is because food companies are required to submit whatever claims they might want to use on a food product if they're dietary supplements. But if they're conventional food products, meaning like, probably the foods that you find in your aisles, whether it's canned food or frozen food, whatever the case is, if it's conventional foods, then food companies are not required to submit to the FDA on any claims that they might use. So I think that's something that I definitely want to highlight as well.
Is that why it used to be every like diet drink was diet, right? And now it's 0 calorie. So like, does that mean that it's not diet, or is it because the claim is, they're claiming it's for a diet, but they wanted to take that claim out and just say that doesn't have any calories?
Yeah, so you're definitely like the right mindset there, Rebecca, because there's so many words out there that food companies can technically use, like diet, all natural, hormone free. There's a couple of statements out there that are unfortunately not considered like certified by any type of third party organization. Now, I would say, like, in terms of claims that we can rely on and that have been certified, it's going to be things like organic. It has to have it has a standard to meet in order to have that organic seal. Another seal that is certified is certified naturally grown. Now, I want to clarify that means certified naturally grown. It does not mean all natural. Those two things are different. As well as non-GMO, that label is also certified, and grass-fed. So if they are not any of those that I mentioned, it's a high likelihood that it is a non-certified food label and claim, and it's definitely something that we should definitely take a grain of salt with.
Personally, I have a problem with sparkling water, and I happen to have a thing here for the water that I've chosen. It's sparkling water, but the ingredients, without boring anybody, are carbonated water, natural flavors, malic acid, vegetable juice for color, blackberry juice, potassium benzoate, sucralose, gum arabic, green tea extract, retinol, niacinamide, calcium, pantothenate or whatever, colic or whatever, biotin, cyanocobalamin, and pyroxidine hydrochloride. As a typical consumer, they try to explain, like, one of them is vitamin B5, whatever, but there's so many things that go into these things that you think you're just getting sparkling water, and the ingredients are water, and they make bubbles in the water. But that's not the case. So that's, how did, like, the FDA has to get involved with something like that for one drink that this thing is. I find it mind-boggling that they can do that. But as a consumer, I find it mind-boggling that you should know what all these things mean.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Otto. Like, it can be confusing as consumers to kind of figure out exactly what those ingredients mean. And I think you guys might have heard the phrase, like, if we cannot say it in one go, it's probably something that maybe is like kind of like a light to go, oh, what is this? And I always
Right.
encourage people to like continue to stay curious about what's in your food and to question, what you see, because unfortunately, conventional food health claims, like for instance, I'm sure your sparkling water might have said it's high in a certain vitamin because there's a little bit of B vitamins, or it's all natural because there's natural flavors. Um, those are things that are unfortunately allowed at the moment under current regulations. Now, with that said, I think it's important for us as consumers to just be in that mindset of questioning what we see, not doubting everything we see, but just questioning and kind of staying curious about, exactly what these things are. And of course, I would say as long as like you're reading your ingredients list and you are looking at the nutrition label, those are two resources that you can definitely rely on versus the health claims you might see at the front of a package or a food label.
Yeah, I mean, it's true of not just sparkling water, but I have one here for potatoes. I'm not going to read this one, but it's also a long list. And you think you're just getting the potato. No, you're getting all kinds of other stuff.
Mhm.
Annatto, color, dextrose, sodium acid, pyrophosphate. Um, these are in a potato, basically. Uh,
Mhm.
I can understand how anybody, including me, can be completely confused when you do read the label. Um, it's very hard. But
Yeah.
people like you are trying to educate us so that we do understand at least what's important on these labels.
Yeah, and I will say, some of the ingredients, are actually preservatives, whether it's to maintain color or to maintain taste, and those are actually meant to make sure that you're buying the product you think you are. So they're not necessarily bad for you, but it's just good
You know,
to, again.
Khy, we have to take a quick break. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we'll be right back with Khy Ee Siew. Very interesting, deciphering food claims and nutrition labels. We'll be right back with Project Independence and You on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org.
So I get this call from my grandma, and she's like,
"What's a podcast and how much does it cost?"
So I tell her, podcasts are like radio shows, but you can download them on any device and listen to them anywhere at any time, and they're free. And then she says,
"I see, but where can you find good ones?"
And I'm like, go to wcwp.org/podcast and check out the lineup of original shows, or download any podcast app on your phone or tablet and search for LIU Studios. And she's all like,
"Oh, that sounds easy."
and then she asked me what an app is.
LIU Studios podcasts, available on any podcast app. You know, those little button things on your phone screen. Just ask your grandkids.
And welcome back to Project Independence and You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM, WCWP.org. I'm Rebecca Miller, along with Otto, Lohse, Christina Liu, and of course our guest, Khy Ee Siew. We've been learning a lot about trying to figure out these food claims and nutrition labels versus package claims. It's so confusing. And I really have to say, I like what you said a few minutes ago, where if you can't pronounce it, maybe you shouldn't, maybe you shouldn't have it because you've got questions. That means you don't really know what it is. So do a little bit of research. I have another question, and then we could get back into like the nitty gritty on the food, on the nutrition facts label. Serving size. I mean, that's another thing that is so confusing. It's like sometimes I'll buy like a bag of chips or something. I'm like, wow, there's only 100 calories. And I get it home and I'm like, and I look and it's like, there's 3.5 servings, but the bag's so small, I could probably eat the whole thing. So it's kind of deceiving. But then again, how do you really know what a serving size is for you? Because a serving size for me is going to be very different than my son, who's 6'1" and over 200 pounds. How do you kind of, so it's not standardized for every person across the board.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Rebecca. And it actually brings up probably one of the most important information that you can find on a nutrition label, and that is the serving size and the servings per container. Now, those two lines of information you're going to find at the very top of the label. And actually, in recent years, the FDA has changed or updated the label to the point where they made those numbers and text a bit bold. So it's a lot more easier for consumers to find that information as well. So with serving size, it's essentially like a specific measured amount. And that's all it is. So if the serving size for, let's say, a can of soup is 1 cup, then that means that whatever nutrients you see on the label is referring to how much nutrients you would get if you ate 1 cup of soup. So that's what serving size is. And I also want to distinguish a good point you made, Rebecca, is that serving size does not necessarily equal to the portion size that you're actually going to be consuming. So I think a lot of people may get confused as to how to calculate exactly, how much sugar they might be eating or sodium or whatever it is you might be trying to calculate. So serving size does not equal portion size. So to kind of understand how much you're truly eating, it's definitely going to be more of like a moment you have to take to yourself and kind of like examine, okay, I'm going to eat this much. Does that look like 1 cup? Is that a little less than 1 cup? And just kind of doing that mental math, so to speak. That's pretty much the only way we can truly know. And then from there, you're able to calculate whether or not you want to multiply what you see on the nutrition facts label or not. So if, for example,
it's like a starting point. It's not necessarily the serving size per person. It's really, I think that's where the word's a little bit tricky, serving size, everybody, okay, so I should only have X amount because, the serving size, but it's really a starting point. So, because I know that I frequently do a lot of different diets where I'll weigh, and I do use that calculation, and because it usually also gives you not just the cup, the tablespoon, but it gives you the grams. And, if you have a scale, you could put the grams in. So, that wording's a little tricky.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. It's just, I think it's the fact that we don't use serving size in our everyday lingo. And so it can kind of be kind of weird almost to be like, what is a serving size? And technically, I think it's just understanding that it doesn't necessarily mean it's the exact amount of everything. I also do want to highlight something else you mentioned, or one of the lines, which says servings per container. And what that means is that it's the amount of serving sizes that you'll find in one package of food. So for instance, kind of using the can of soup example again, if the serving size is 1 cup and it says servings per container is 3, that means if I finish that entire can of soup, I'm going to be eating 3 cups of soup. And so if I ate the entire can, which is 3 servings or 3 cups, I would have to multiply every number I see on the nutrition facts label by 3. Because again, the nutrition label only accounts for how much nutrient is in one serving size, which in my example is 1 cup. So if I eat 3 times that amount, I would have to multiply by 3. So it is a little bit of math, kind of like what you mentioned.
Right. And I think it plays on your psyche too. If you're someone who's always kind of, you're watching what you eat or you measure, when you see serving size and you go over, it's kind of like psychological too. You don't want to go over the serving size because then you're overeating, but the way you're saying it, I like, because it really is just kind of a starting point so that what you choose to eat and how, what the nutritional value is in those, in that serving for yourself.
Something on that, all right? Like I have your sample label here, right? It indicates 4 servings per container and sodium 430 milligrams. Mm-hmm. Is that 430 milligrams per serving or for the entire right in the middle
Good
of my
question.
Is that for the one serving or for all 4?
So that's a great question. So the number you see on any nutrition facts label is going to be the amount of nutrients per one serving. So for the 430 milligrams of sodium in that example, that's going to be 430 milligrams of sodium per one serving.
So,
Now,
wow. So you would
yeah,
wind up with 1,600 milligrams if
yeah,
you ate the whole thing yourself.
exactly.
You are now going to end up, it was 19% of your daily. Now it's 72%, right?
Yeah.
Of your daily sodium intake if you ate the whole thing. Like a typical example of that, frankly, is a can of soup. You could eat a can of soup fairly easily. Uh, Yet, what we're saying is if that thing says 2 servings, then you've got to double everything that's on that list. So it's even worse than I thought, to be honest, um, as far as the sodium in particular goes. Older people have to worry about sodium and sugar as far as that goes, more so than a lot of other people. But that's an interesting point. I never knew that.
It says right on there too. It says on where it says calories, it says amount per serving. So that
Yeah.
kind of tells
But it
you.
doesn't, but it doesn't say clearly that those items that are listed below it are per serving. It just sort of gives you like the thinking, you have to think about what that really is. That's not clearly saying that that's per serving.
Yeah,
Only the calories are per serving,
right.
not all the stuff that's listed below it. And that's per serving.
And I will say, you also brought up something interesting, Otto, which is you mentioned percentages. Now, for everyone here, like a nutrition label has nutrients in grams, but one easy way to indicate or find out whether or not something is high or low in a nutrient is you go to the very right of a nutrient label and you find all those percentages on the right. Now, those percentages stand for something called percent daily value. So basically, kind of like what Otto said, like ideally every day you kind of want to either meet 100% of your daily needs of that nutrient or try to stay under it, depending on, again, whether it's sodium or whether it's vitamins. So for something that's considered like low in sodium or low in any type of nutrient, you want to stay under 5% or less. Now, if something is going to be high in a specific nutrient, whether it's sodium, fiber, that percent is going to be 20% or higher. So 5% or lower is low, 20% or higher is high. Now, the example you mentioned, Otto, said that the percentage per serving was about 19% of your daily value. So that's definitely on the higher end for sure, for compared to other products. And you can use that 5% and 20% hint towards any of the nutrients that you see on the label that has a percentage on it. So you can use it for sodium, you can use it for added sugar. I believe fiber might have a percentage as well, even carbohydrates. So definitely use that kind of tool to your advantage when you go food shopping.
So one of the other things I'm looking at, all your paperwork that you sent over, I get mixed up a lot when I'm looking at fats too, like saturated, unsaturated, what is good, what is bad, or what amount is good, what is bad, what should we stay away from? Could you just kind of like give us a little bit further detail on fats in general?
Yeah, so fats are actually the entire category. It's a very important nutrient to include in our diet. So there's kind of 3 major nutrients out there that we want to make sure that we're getting in our meals and snacks, and that is carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Vitamins and minerals as well, but the carbs, proteins, and fats are kind of like the major ones you're going to find primarily in your foods and snacks. With that said, that definitely emphasizes the importance of making sure we do have fats in our diet. It's just about where we're getting these fats from that maybe we want to take a second look at. So for instance, you mentioned a couple of types of fats out there, like saturated fats, trans fats, unsaturated fats. So for things like trans fats, you definitely ideally want to stay under 2 grams per day for trans fats. And for saturated fats, it is recommended to make sure that you stay under about 10% of your daily calories coming from saturated fats. So, kind of taking that into consideration, that means everyone who has different calorie needs will have different recommended limitations for saturated fats as well.
Could you give an example of the type of food that you'd find a trans fat versus a saturated fat?
Sure. So, it's funny because a lot of the foods that have trans fats probably does have some sort of saturated fats. So you might see those two fats kind of being in the same product. So for trans fats, it's becoming less and less, I guess, included in our foods. And that's because there's been a big push back against trans fats, and there's been a lot of steps to try to reduce it as much as possible. So typically we did find it in like a lot of processed foods and like processed desserts, especially for trans fats. But again, I'm seeing that less and less. So if you happen to see trans fats on there, just make sure keep it under 2 grams if possible. For saturated fats, you're going to find that in a lot of fatty red meat products. So when I say red meat, things like beef, pork, and especially the fatty cuts of it, they just naturally have some saturated fats. Butter as well tends to have saturated fats, and any products that use those ingredients as well. So if any baked goods, for example, uses butter, it's going to have the saturated fats transfer over as well.
So what kind of a fat would be in, say, an avocado?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. So you mentioned kind of the last type of fat, which is like unsaturated fats. So those are typically, or actually they're nicknamed like heart healthy fats.
Right.
And these are the kind of fats that we definitely recommend people to include more of in our diet. And that's because these heart healthy fats actually help us to lower the cholesterol levels in our blood, which is really, really amazing, because it's weird because we typically think that fats will raise cholesterol.
I know, yeah.
But for unsaturated fats, so things like avocados, nuts, seeds, fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, they're going to be high in those unsaturated fats. And we definitely want to make sure we're including those in our meals as much as possible.
So, and like oils too, avocado oil now you can find, which I love, and olive oil.
Mm-hmm. Yes, kind of exactly what you said, Rebecca. Thank you for mentioning those. Olive oil, canola oil has a bit as well, and what was the last one? Oh yes, avocado oil.
Right. So, cholesterol, there's it's kind of confusing too when you see how much cholesterol is in the food that you're eating, because cholesterol means different things. So it's not saying if you have this cholesterol, your cholesterol is going to go up this much, because there's people that have high cholesterol. So it's just kind of giving you an idea, like this is a food that if you have high cholesterol, maybe you should stay away from this if it's high. But can you talk a little bit about what that measurement of cholesterol actually is?
That's a great question. So with cholesterol, I think it's important to understand that there's a difference between the cholesterol that's measured and tested in your blood versus dietary cholesterol. And then what we see on the nutrition label is an indicator of dietary cholesterol, meaning that there's just a natural amount of cholesterol that we can find in most foods. And typically they're not necessarily added to foods at all. They just, again, naturally have them. Now, I think the biggest confusion is that people believe if you have foods that are very high in dietary cholesterol, it contributes to elevated cholesterol levels in your blood. But what research has found is that actually saturated fats and trans fats are bigger factors in contributing towards our blood cholesterol levels compared to dietary cholesterol. And so I think there should definitely be a shift and a bit more of a focus on those saturated fats and trans fats that we talked about, as they happen to have a bigger impact on our cholesterol levels compared to dietary cholesterol.
Right. Okay.
Now, in there, it's the same story. Everybody's body is different. And some people can eat saturated fats and still end up with lower cholesterol. But that's why we go to the doctor, I think, to get a reading on what our blood cholesterol measurement is. But it's still a good idea to keep the fats down, I think, Although the fats taste good, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
A lot of good fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the point that genetics is a very important factor, Otto, because you're definitely right. Like every single one of us has specific nutrient needs, and the way we respond and absorb those nutrients are going to be very different as well. So definitely consulting with your physician and your dietitian is going to be helpful.
Okay, great. We actually have to take a quick break. We're learning a lot from Khy Ee Siew. Thank you so much again for joining us. And we have one more segment with you. I do have some more questions. So really looking forward to speaking with you a little bit more. You're listening to Project Independence in You on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. We will be right back.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
And welcome back to Project Independence in You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. I'm Rebecca Miller, along with Otto Lohse and, of course, Christina Liu and Dan Cox. And we're speaking today with Khy Ee Siew, and she's an RD, so that's a registered dietitian, and you're with the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Nassau County. We're so happy to have you here talking about deciphering food claims, nutrition labels versus food package claims. So there's so much involved in just the package. I know Otto was, talking a little bit during break, so I'm going to go right to him about, specifically gluten-free.
Yeah, that's an item that seems to come up on a lot of foods, gluten-free. So your attitude, or my attitude right away, is, it must be good for me. Even if I don't have a gluten problem, which would be basically the celiac disease, that unfortunately is a very serious problem for people who have it. But where does the gluten-free part stand as far as the typical person is concerned?
Yeah, no, that's an amazing question. I think I feel like if you ask any dietitian about the gluten-free label, we definitely approach it with caution, because number one, it is a very important label, especially for people with celiac disease. And for those of us who may not know, if any individual that consumes gluten and they have celiac disease, it can actually trigger actually almost a harmful reaction that occurs in their body that can cause potential negative side effects, things like pain, or maybe in the long run kind of lead to things like nutrient deficiencies or anything like that. So it's a very, very important label for people with celiac disease. In terms of people who do not have celiac disease, it is of course not required to buy products that have the gluten-free label. And I think it's also important to know that the FDA does not require food companies to have a gluten-free labeling on it. So you might see a lot of products out there in the supermarket that happen to be gluten-free, but will not have those words listed on it. Now, I understand that there's a little bit of a positive mindset with gluten-free in terms of the fact that people think it's healthier. Now, what gluten-free just means is that it is completely free of gluten, meaning that it's not going to have that substance in it to trigger that reaction for people with celiac disease. But it does not necessarily mean that that product is like healthier compared to its counterparts. So I hope that cleared up some misconceptions with gluten free.
So some of the packaging too. It entices you. Oh, like gluten free, of course. Dairy free, GMOs, no GMOs. Whatever. Keto friendly. Low sodium.
Healthy at heart.
That healthy for your heart. And they're like, now a lot of these products have these little bubbles with saying, so you're kind of you're really drawn to it. Just how much of, I want to say, marketing is so important too. Obviously, Otto also brought that up. Marketing of the product, and I mean, they can't put something like gluten-free or sugar-free or low sodium. I'm sure the FDA has rules on that too. But can you talk a little bit about the packaging and the claims, not just in the label, but what it says on the package to kind of get you, oh, this is gluten-free, or this is sugar-free, low sodium, keto-friendly.
Yeah, and actually, before I kind of dive into your question, I did want to kind of clarify some things with the gluten-free because it is important.
Yes,
So
of course.
for those of us who are not sure if something is gluten-free or not, you definitely want to look for those words gluten-free on a product. And if you're still unsure, just making sure that that product is avoidant of wheat, soy, eggs, nuts, and milk. And that can also be kind of another indicator. Now, it doesn't mean that just because it says it avoids wheat, that it is entirely gluten-free. So that's just the last thing I wanted to point out
Okay.
on that topic. But to kind of your point on all those claims that are out there that can be kind of almost confusing to navigate, there's definitely a marketing aspect that food companies can use to their advantage. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the claim is like false, but you can kind of think of it as them inflating the claim to make their product seem a bit more I guess, marketable, so to speak. So, kind of like a quick example of that is that I was in the supermarket last week, and at the corner of my eye, I saw like this table of Pop-Tarts. Now, I feel like a lot of us here kind of understand that Pop-Tarts are infamously high in added sugar, and all that stuff. Makes a great dessert, though, and can definitely be part of a healthy lifestyle with moderation, yada yada. But I think what was so interesting to me when I looked at the front of the package of that Pop-Tart is that it said, I'm paraphrasing here, but it said good source of 5 vitamins and minerals. Like that's what it said on the front of that Pop-Tarts. So I was like, okay, let me just, kind of go to the back of the nutrition facts label and see what's up. Maybe they changed some things. Maybe it is a good source. Who knows? And nothing really changed in terms of the level of added sugar in it, and the fact that it's overall pretty low in nutritional value. But what was funny is that if you look at the bottom where it says the vitamins and minerals, I think for vitamin D or for calcium, it happened to have 10% or meet 10% of its daily values. And for people who don't know, for anything that has the words good source on it, it has to make sure that that nutrient meets at least 10% of your daily values. So again, technically speaking,
Right.
that Pop-Tart has 10% of your calcium, your daily calcium. So technically it could be a good source of calcium.
And those Pop-Tarts in a college town, when they see that, they're filling that card up right away. They're like, oh, this is great. This is nutritional.
Yeah. And I want to say, I'm not trying to, force people to not buy Pop-Tarts at all. That's completely not the case. I definitely think that any food can be part of, a healthy lifestyle, thinking about moderation and thinking about what works for you. I told the story to tell people that food claims are, for the most part, a very small component of the big picture. And with nutrition, you always want to look at the big picture.
Right.
Is there in a place like we talked earlier about all these names of items that are under the ingredients area, biotin and whatever, all the ones I rattled off before. Is there like a little gyp sheet somewhere that would list the top 25 ingredients so that if you were out shopping, you could have this little gyp sheet with you and it says, no, you don't want that ingredient in your food. To me, that's the bigger mystery of this whole thing, is that area where it's talking a different planet. The language is something that we don't get. The other part of it is fat is fat. Obviously it's complicated, but sodium, we understand, sugar. But then you get down to this little world of terminology that is like Greek. You don't have any idea what they're talking about. Is there something that, like the chemists put this stuff in there, a little chemical list, if you will? Is there such a thing?
So I think if you're curious about finding more information on the ingredients list, I would definitely recommend people to check out the FDA's website and look for something called GRAS foods. So GRAS foods. Now that's an acronym for generally recognized as safe foods. So the FDA has compiled that GRAS foods list. To kind of, I guess, highlight that, okay, these are the ingredients that we generally recognize as safe for consumption, which is great for us as consumers. So I think that could be a resource that could be helpful for people who have the same question as you, Otto.
As a result of this show, I have a much higher regard for the FDA and what they do. I had no idea. They talk about food for people, for animals, drugs, medical devices, tobacco. They try to review all these things, frankly, to keep us safe from people who maybe don't care. It's a profit-making proposition. They can sell things more. There's all kinds of stuff that could go on if they weren't monitored somewhat.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a little bit of a philosophical point.
And, I agree, like the FDA, it does so much regarding, nutrition, facts labels, and just kind of overseeing, some of the claims that we mentioned. But I do want to highlight that for the conventional foods, so anything that's not a dietary supplement, the FDA does not require food companies to advertise or submit an application to indicate that they are putting those claims on it. So I think there's definitely more work to be done on their end in terms of regulating what is said on a conventional food as well. They're doing a lot, but there's definitely ways we can improve as well.
Yeah, it goes beyond food. If you go on the internet and if you have neuropathy or whatever, there's 4,000 pairs of socks, different creams, different this, that fix everything. And there are people that, frankly, that they'll market with a shaky product and get away with it. And that's why we do need something like the FDA to keep on top of people. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and so much of this is overwhelming. It's overwhelming kind of for me. I'm sitting here, I've got, everything that you've sent us. Christina gave us a packet of information. The label's a cute little box with bold numbers, but there's so much that is involved with it, and just kind of understanding, as really informed people as we are, what does serving size mean? Like all these kinds of things. So, for the people that are listening are going to be watching this show, one of the recommendations is, hey, can I talk to a registered dietitian? How do I get to speak to a nutritionist? What's the best way to do it? And I think we had one of your staff on at our advisory last week, a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things she said was, you can start out by going to your primary care doctor and just say, you need help, you need some guidance. Do we have, is it part, if it's part of your insurance plan or not, or find out. But I think that there are ways to get referred and to be covered. So, speak to your doctor. If this kind of stuff is just confusing, it's confusing to me. And I have the source here, I've got Khy Ee here, I've got, endless amount of information, and I still have a lot of questions, and some things are a little tricky and confusing. So speak to your doctor, and maybe they can, get you to talk to a registered dietitian and, figure out your nutritional plans. And, because one of the things that Otto and you both talked a little bit about is, some things aren't within our control. We could be as perfect as we can be with our foods, but there are just some things that are genetic and, maybe diabetes or high cholesterol, things regarding that. So what, as a registered dietitian, aside from all of this incredible research and knowledge that you have, do you, through Cornell Cooperative, or do you see individual people?
So at the moment, we do have some counseling services offered, but that's primarily catered towards the senior population, because we are working in partnership with Nassau County Office of Aging.
Right.
So they kind of employ us to do the counseling services for their seniors. So that's
Right.
what we have at the moment. And I do want to highlight what you said, Rebecca. Like, if anyone ever wants to see a dietitian, you can think of us almost like as specialists. So if you go to your primary care physician first, they're likely in contact with some dietitians, and they can probably give you the best referral that is covered under your insurance policy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that, it is confusing, and people that have different health conditions, especially regarding your heart, foods to stay away from, if you need to lose weight, there's so many different reasons. And, you can go to your doctor, and your doctor is more than likely able to pull out some paper or a sheet of paper and say, here's this is the diet for you, or, that kind of a thing.
And I will say too, actually, you kind of brought up the point, like for people who are looking for like nutrition programs, we also have like community nutrition programs, meaning like, CCE Nassau is out there teaching nutrition classes, sometimes at libraries as well. So if you want to hear about any upcoming events, we do have a website, ccenassau.org, if we have any upcoming nutrition classes.
Do you have a phone number too? Is there a contact number?
What was that website?
ccenassau.org. And I don't mean to plug in my organization's website to kind of promote it and kind of a hot.
We would be asking you that anyway. Yeah, we need the website, and if you have a phone number that you could give us. And yeah,
I believe the phone number will be on the website as well, just because I would say kind of the best way is to either go to our office, which is in East Meadow Park, or give us a call, which is the number is also on the website as well.
Right. And anybody listening or watching this later on can always call 311 or 516-869-6311 and just ask to speak with Christina or myself or anybody on the Project Independence team. And we'd be, very happy to connect you with Cornell Cooperative. You do a lot of programming for us. We have your speaking all the time. So,
And I have the phone number. I just buzzing in here. So it's 516-832-2591 is the main number. And I have to say the website is such a good resource. There's a lot of great articles. I mean, I'm on there all the time when, scheduling you guys. So there's such great topics. And I always say this is like my favorite. You should only see the paper that I have on this end that I've been writing. So.
Oh, thank you, Christina.
Well, yeah. And thank you for all this great information. It's cleared up a lot too. And I think that, especially that serving size is not standardized for everyone, and that to kind of know that it's just a starting point so that you can really measure out based on what you're given. Because maybe it says the serving size is 1 cup for soup, but you have a plan where you're supposed to have 2 cups. So it's really just to kind of allow you to be able to calculate whatever it is you're looking for, whether it be calories. You don't want to have too much cholesterol. Otto pointed out sodium, which is, I think sodium is like one of the ingredients that you can like feel almost automatically if you do have too much of, right? Like it's like, okay, how many times, that must have been a lot of salt in there. So, it's really a good starting point. And, just a lot of really good information. So we want to thank you so much for.
I just want to touch on one quick area, like, maybe we don't have time.
Yeah, we don't have time. I think that we do need to go to a break, but we'll definitely have Khy Ee back again. And Otto, you also have her phone number now and the website. So maybe the answers will be right there. So thank you so much for joining us, Khy Ee. We are so grateful for you spending a full hour on the topic of deciphering food claims, nutritional labels, and food package claims. It was really a lot of information, and we look forward to having you back.
Yes, thank you so much again for having me today, guys. I enjoyed our conversation, and I would definitely love to come back and either talk about the same topic because there's so much to unpack or a different one.
Excellent.